This is Danny Bobrow, President of AIM Dental Marketing, welcoming you to this installment of the Practice Perfection Web-Based Education Series. Today's presentation is titled, The Top 10 Mistakes Dental Practices Make and How to Avoid Them, and will be delivered by Mr. Kevin Henry. Kevin has served in the dental publishing industry for more than 20 years. He is the former Group Editorial Director for Dental Products Report, Managing Editor for Dental Economics, and Editor-in-Chief for drbicuspid.com. He now serves as the co-founder of IgniteDA, a community designed to empower, enlighten, and educate dental assistants. He has spoken to dental assistants throughout the world, in person and through the Dental Assistant Nation podcast series, reminding them of the vital role they play every day in their practice. He is also a certified DISC trainer, helping dental practices learn how to better understand each other through personality assessments and training. As an attendee today, you will learn about the biggest mistakes that have cost other practices countless hours and resources and how to avoid them in your practice. You will discover how to put systems in place and attain cohesiveness in your team. You will learn verbal skills that create better communication between your team members and build trust with your patients. Kevin will reveal how every team member can have a direct impact on the practice's success. Attendance at today's event entitles you to apply to receive 1.5 hours of PACE-approved continuing education credit. Shortly following the presentation, you will receive information on how to apply to receive your CE. To be eligible, you will need to successfully complete a brief quiz, as well as note the following course number, which is HEN 011723. Again, that's HEN 011723. As this is a pre-recorded webcast, I invite and encourage you to submit your questions and comments directly to Kevin at his email, which is kevin.henry@igniteda.net. Once again, that's kevin.henry@igniteda.net. Kevin has promised to personally respond to each of your questions directly. And now it is my distinct pleasure to welcome to the Practice Perfection stage my friend and colleague, Mr. Kevin Henry.
Thank you so much, Danny. Hey, always good to work with you. I really appreciate this opportunity. This is one of my favorite courses that I get to do throughout the year, to study clubs and to dental meetings, because there's so many things that go on in the dental practice every day that we sometimes don't even realize are going on. And it's one of those things that if we'll take a step backwards and really examine the situation and see what is happening in our practice by looking at examples from other practices, I think we can learn a great deal. And that's my goal tonight, is to show you things that I've learned in the past 20 years that will help you understand how to have a more cohesive team, how to make sure the team members you have you're actually keeping, as well as how to run your practice better like a business.
Sounds terrific.
I know we've got an hour for 10 things. So I want to make sure that you and I have a little bit of time to chat at the end. So we will get started.
All right.
And I always start every presentation, whether I'm in person or doing a webinar, by saying thank you to the men and women who have served in our military. If you ever have or have a family member who have, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I know that some of the things I will say tonight you may not agree with, but I'm glad that we can live in a country where we can disagree and still have the freedom to speak our minds. So again, thank you to our
Amen to that.
Yeah, thanks, sir. And speaking of our military, I always like to tell my audiences about this as well. I was just recently in San Diego, saw this statue there in San Diego. I know there's one in Key West. I know that there is one in other parts of the country. But this is one of the most famous photos in our American lexicon. And Danny, I got a question for you. Do you know the dental connection with this photo, other than there are swapping saliva?
Yeah, I was going to say maybe one of them has a pronounced overbite, but no, I guess I don't.
Well, that lady who is being kissed was not a nurse. She was a dental assistant. Her name was Greta Friedman. Yeah, Greta Friedman. She was working at her Times Square office in New York City as a dental assistant, heard the commotion outside, came outside, and was suddenly world famous. She told the story before she passed away that this was literally 15 seconds of her life. The man who was kissing her in the photo, she had never met before. He was actually on a date with another woman when this photo was taken, and they were brought back together, I believe it was 50 years after this, by the BBC to talk about that day. So Greta said her life changed in the blink of an eye. But Greta's family asked me, whenever she passed away a few years ago, they know that I talk to dental audiences, they know I talk to dental assistants all over the world, to make sure that Greta's legacy of loving being a dental assistant is out there. She hated being called the kissing nurse. So I'm asking all of you to help me spread the legacy that is probably the world's most famous dental assistant right there, Greta Friedman.
Will do. That's great.
Well, you know, whenever Danny was introducing me, you might have seen the title slide of "You're Doing It Wrong." And I know some of you were going, well, that's a real positive way to enter into this. But I want to tell you why I titled it that, because that was after my daughter, who recently got married, which still just blows my mind that she did. But when she was about this age, and by the way, yes, she has aged much better than I have. There's no doubt about that. But when she was very young, we decided, my ex-wife and I decided that, you know, she needed a pet. She was an only child. We knew she was going to be an only child. We knew she wasn't really ready for a puppy or a kitty or anything like that. So we decided to take her to the hermit crab store. Now, for some of you, you may not remember when shopping malls had a hermit crab display in the middle of them, and some even had a store. But we decided one day to take her to the mall and let her pick out a pair of hermit crabs. One of them she picked out to bring home was this beautiful blue sparkly shell, and she named it Sparkles. And we were like, oh, that's a great name, Julia. We love that. And then she picked out another hermit crab to bring home with Sparkles, a green-shelled hermit crab. And we said, well, Julia, what's the name of that one? And she looked at us without any emotion, just looked at us and said, Chris. And to this day, and she still doesn't know why she named it Chris. She didn't have any friends named Chris, but Chris and Sparkles came home with us. Well, as the weeks went on, we loved Chris and Sparkles. We made them part of our nightly bedtime routine. Well, there was one night that I noticed that Sparkles wasn't exactly moving a whole lot. And the next night, I noticed that Sparkles hadn't moved from the night before. And when it got to the third night, I realized that Sparkles had probably gone on to hermit crab heaven. Julia, I tried to distract her. We tried to say she was sleeping. We tried to do all these things. But me being the overprotective dad that I guess I still am to this day, whenever I realized that Sparkles was no longer with us, there was one night that I snuck into Julia's room, and I just decided it would be better for her not to see her dead hermit crab. And I snuck in there. I got in the cage. I pulled Sparkles out, and yes, Sparkles had passed away. And I went and threw Sparkles in the trash. Now, looking back, this was a horrific mistake that I made. And the next day, I realized it even more when I came home from work and I was changing and getting ready to have a fun evening with my daughter, and I heard these little feet stomping down the hall, and she had Sparkles in her hand. She had found him in the trash and realized who had thrown him in the trash, and yes, I was in trouble. So I was trying to think what I could do to bail myself out. I was trying to think how I was going to spin this. How am I going to make my daughter not mad at me? Well, my daughter and my ex-wife went on to tell me that they both knew Sparkles had died. And they both had been planning this funeral for Sparkles until I went in and kind of messed things up. So later that night, we had a beautiful ceremony for Sparkles. We buried Sparkles in a matchbox. It was just a tremendous ceremony. So why do I tell you all this? I tell you all this because my Julia that day told me, she said, you're doing it wrong. And it's something that I've always remembered to this day. Anytime that I think I'm making a good decision and maybe I'm not, or maybe I'm trying to avoid a situation that should be dealt with, I hear those little 3-year-old words in my head, you're doing it wrong. But I also realized one other thing, that had there been some communication between the two of them and me letting me know that Sparkles had died and they had a plan, or between me and them, me telling them I was going to sneak into the room and remove Sparkles, it probably would have created a situation that was nothing like the one that we endured. So I hope that as we go through these mistakes tonight, that you'll learn that communication is such a key in so many things. And so many situations could be avoided if people simply talked and listened to each other. So that is the story of Sparkles, and how that is still one of the biggest lessons that I learned to this day, that we need to be communicating to each other, because we all know there's a right way, there's a wrong way to do things in the practice. There's an easy way to do things, and there's a way that sometimes is the right way to do it, even though it's harder. So as we get into this tonight, I want you to understand that I'm not preaching at you. I'm not telling you all the wrong things you're doing. I'm simply wanting to remind you of things that I have seen. You know, as Danny mentioned, 20 years in the media, 13 of those were spent with Dental Economics magazine, went around to countless practices around the country, watching how not only these practices did dentistry, but also how they ran as a business. And that's where a lot of the lessons that I learned came from, were during my years at Dental Economics, and those are ones that I still carry forth to this day. So let's dive in. Let's go to our first mistake that I always see, and it's one that was beaten into my head when I was at Dental Economics. Our joke when I was at that magazine was there wouldn't be a Dental Economics magazine if dentists knew how to properly run their business all the time. And so treating your practice like a small business is such an important thing. And as we start the new year, I hope that you'll make it a resolution, a goal, whatever you want to say, that this will be the year that you really pay attention to the numbers, that you really know, the different metrics, those KPIs that we always hear about, that you'll actually know them instead of being stumped by them whenever somebody says, hey, what's your patient retention rate? What's your recall rate? All these different things, your case acceptance rates, that instead of guessing, you'll actually have those answers and be able to, eloquently articulate exactly what those numbers might be. And I just want you to think about any business that's out there, because again, I believe dental practices are a small business. But think about, Starbucks, Apple, Coca-Cola, every one of these businesses, we have some kind of thought about them in our head. My dad, who's getting ready to turn 80 next month, he is a guy that he will drink Coca-Cola but will not drink Pepsi. My wife was born and raised in Seattle, and Starbucks is really the only coffee that she'll ever drink. Do not dare offer her Pete's Coffee or Dunkin' Donuts. She has a particular coffee that she wants, and some of you all may be exactly the same way. There's only certain TV channels that you'll watch. There's only certain stores that you will shop in. There are only certain places that you'll go get your groceries. And that's because we have become very in tune with that business. And whether it's convenience, whether it's we like their products better, whether it's we have a better feel whenever we're around them, there's a reason why we support them over others. And so as we're on this call tonight, I want you to think about what are the reasons that your dental patients come to your business instead of the one down the street, or for some of you that's in the building with you. What separates you from the rest of the crowd? I was born and raised in Oklahoma, so you may hear a little southern drawl every once in a while, but one of the things that we used to do all the time when I was growing up is that we would go to barbecue competitions. And if you're a vegan or a vegetarian, I'm going to apologize for about the next 60 seconds of my talk here tonight. But one of the things that I remember growing up is that all these smokers would be lined up down the street, and every barbecue chef would have the same cut of meat handed to him or her. But they would have a certain amount of time to make that same cut of meat stand out from the smoker that is right next to them on the right and the left. Now, some of them would use a different rub. Some of them would use different wood. Some of them would heat at a different temperature. There's lots of different ways that you can make things stand out from the person who's right next to you. And sometimes some of them, yes, used as secret sauce. So I really want you to think about, as we think about your practice as a business, What is your secret sauce? What separates you from the other dental practices that are on this call? Because I hate to tell you, when we boil it all down, all dental practices basically do the same thing, especially GPs. So how do you separate yourself, and how do you make sure that your patients aren't just customers, but they're loyal customers as well? So I was recently speaking at the Inland Northwest Dental Conference in beautiful Spokane, Washington. I love getting up to Washington State every chance I can and up to the Pacific Northwest. And as I'm driving along I-90, I saw this sign, and I whipped across 4 lanes of traffic, because what stood out to me, you'll probably notice as well, right? You notice those hours that they're open? That's right, 7 to 7, 7 days a week. So I went into Harkin Dental Excellence in Spokane, Washington, and I asked the office manager, I said, how do you do this? And she basically went on to explain to me that they have shift work. There's basically 3 dental practices that operate within the span of this one practice, making sure that they all cover 7 to 7, 7 days a week. And I joked with her, I said, there's a lot of things that I can think of I'd rather be doing on a Saturday morning at 7 a.m. than getting my teeth cleaned. And she smiled as she looked at me, and she said, you realize that's our most popular appointment time, 7 a.m. on Saturdays and 7 a.m. on Sundays. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Everybody wants to get in, get done what they need to do, move on with their day, whether it's, a soccer game, whether it's church, whatever it is that they're going to do that weekend, they want to check that dental box and move on. Now, I can tell you this. I have never looked up the Yelp reviews or the Google reviews for Harkin Dental Excellence. I don't know how excellent Harkin Dental Excellence is. But I can tell you, to some patients in Spokane, Washington, they're the best around. And why? Because it's convenient.
Their hours are excellent.
Exactly. It matches their schedule, right? And so I think that we've got to be thinking about how to distinguish our business from the other ones around. And now, please don't leave comments after this webinar that he said we had to be open 7 to 7, 7 days a week. I am not saying that. What I am saying is that Harkin Dental Excellence found a way to stand out from the competition. And I'm asking you, what is your reason? And by the way, the most common response I usually get to that question about what makes your practice stand out, more people will often say, well, it's our team that makes the difference. And if that's the case, well, stay tuned for some of these other mistakes we're going to be talking about tonight, because keeping that team is so vital, especially in today's dental environment. So I really want you to think about it, and I don't have time to go into this a lot tonight, but mission statements, I believe, are so very important. Mission statements not only tell me why your business exists, but it's a reason for you to rally your team around it and to make sure everybody understands, whether they've worked there 20 years or 20 minutes, that this is why your business exists. So I'm going to just ask, maybe for your homework, as we're starting this new year, maybe you look at your mission statement and say, is this still who we are? I can tell you, numerous dental practices changed their mission statement after COVID-19 because they realized that COVID-19 changed who they were as an industry or as a business. And it changed a lot of who we are as an industry as well. So I think it's always good to go back and look at this mission statement, because it's something that tells me who you are, and it tells your employees who you are and what you stand for as well.
I think you're raising an excellent point, Kevin, because I think sometimes people think that these statements, positioning statements, vision, mission, core values, and your tagline are that the audience is the dental consuming public. It's your prospective and current patients, and it is, but it's equal or more important is that it reminds the team why they exist, what they do, for whom they do it, and why.
Absolutely.
And that's why when, I always encourage people, as far as our part of our telephone skills training, to enthusiastically state your tagline each and every time you answer the phone, which means it has to lend itself to, to be easily communicated. But it's not just to tell the caller who you are, what you do, and why you do it. It's to remind you.
Amen. I agree completely. And I know in the hustle of the day, schedule falls apart, you can't find a lab case, whatever it might be, things like that go out of your mind. But it's something that we've got to constantly be reminded who we are, why we exist, and why we do the things we do. I couldn't agree more, Danny. And I'm a big fan. My wife, who's pictured there on the right, my wife introduced me to Simon Sinek, Sinek, and his Start With Why video that is on YouTube. It's about 20 minutes. I highly encourage you, if you get a chance to watch it, it's really something that has changed how I look at things, because Simon believes that when you start with why, the why is your core values, those things that you wouldn't jeopardize for anything else. And for some of us, my daughter and my wife are my personal whys. They're why I do what I do every day. But when it comes to business, there are things that we believe in that really, again, we wouldn't jeopardize for anything. For a lot of us, that's patient health. For a lot of us, that may be the team that we work with. There's a lot of whys that you can find in the professional industry. But I think it's so important that we think about what those whys are, and then how does everything we do every day revolve around that. And Danny, as you were just mentioning, with telephone skills, with interaction with patients, they want to know what makes you different. They want to know why they should trust their oral health to you. And having that why and understanding your mission statement and maybe even a couple of sentences to always explain to patients, I think is so critical in today's world.
Yeah, it's huge because it imbues the communication with enthusiasm, which you can't really fake. So you have to really believe in your why, and then it comes through, and people definitely respond to that because, as Henry Ford said, nobody ever bought anything without an exchange of enthusiasm.
And that's such a great quote. Absolutely. Well, hey, let's be enthusiastic about this one, what do you say? And that is treating your coworkers better in 2023. It is something that I have been just stunned whenever I've gone into dental practice and I've seen what goes on behind the scenes. And I'll give you an example. I was in Miami, Florida, when I was with Dental Economics, and I was watching from the back just the interaction between a dentist and a dental assistant. And as the instruments were being passed from the assistant to the dentist, one fell on the floor. It happens, right? We know it happens every day. Well, the dentist, without looking up and with the patient in the chair, just said as coldly as you can imagine, I could train a spider monkey to do your job. Now, I want you to think about the reaction that there was, not only from the dental assistant, but also the patient in the chair. I can tell you, if I'm that patient, I don't want to be anywhere near that scene. And every little bit of apprehension I've had about being there just shot up about 1,000%. So I really want you to think about not only what is said during the day, but things like eye rolls and heavy sighs and cabinets that maybe don't need to be closed as hard as they are. Little things like that I think are so very important every day, because it's not only how we treat each other, but there are also things that we can pick up on as patients. If you take off your dentist hat or your dental team hat and put on your customer hat, if you walk into a restaurant where there's a bad vibe, you walk into a bar where there's a bad vibe, whatever it is, you don't want to stay there very long, do you? And your patients feel the exact same way in your practice. I remember Walter Haley, who used to run Dental Boot Camp way long ago, asked a question one time, and it still sticks with me to this day. He said, when you're awake during the week, where do you spend the majority of your time? And it's with the family that's chosen for you, not necessarily the family you choose. During the week, you're at your practice more than you're at your house, when you're awake at least. So how do you make sure that those hours that you're awake, you're actually enjoying, you're actually thriving, you're actually getting along rather than walking on eggshells or trying to figure out how to avoid talking to someone or, whatever it might be. Again, there's a thing that we have to remember is that perception is reality. And if your patients perceive that things are going poorly in your practice, then that's how they're going to view you, whether that's on social media whether that's in person, whether that's with their next appointment. So make sure the time that you spend every day in your practice, it's spent toward good things. It's spent toward positivity rather than tearing each other down. And dentists on the line, I'm going to tell you, a lot of this may boil down to you. And I know that leadership is sometimes an eye-rolling subject, but I will tell you, there's such a difference between being a boss and being a leader. And I want to ask you, as we start this new year, how are you being a leader in your practice? How do your dental team members know the direction you're going, what you want to accomplish, how they play a role in that this year? I think it's so very important for everybody to be on the same page. You know, one of the things that I get every morning in my inbox is a newsletter from Science Daily. Now, Science Daily takes the work that is being done by scientists all over the world and boils it down into small words that even I can understand. And I'm always thankful for that. You know, and it's on everything from the evolution of dinosaurs to COVID-19 to, you know, all these different things. Well, scientists did a study and they said that primarily human beings are motivated by one of 4 R words. And these are the R words that those scientists listed in that study. And if you think about it, every one of us is motivated by a different thing. That's one of the reasons why I love DISC so much and why I love diving into personalities and working with dental teams on that. Is because everybody's motivated by something different. But how do you make sure that you find as a leader a way to, if somebody is motivated by recognition versus somebody that's motivated by rewards, how do you make sure both those people understand, here's where we're going this year, and here's where I want you to help us get to that goal? You know, Linda Miles, who, Danny, I know you admire just as much as I do. Linda Miles once said this, and I think it's so right, that praise and appreciation we all need. And we're all, as human beings, we have this desire to know that we're making a difference. We have this desire to know that what we're doing matters. And so I ask you, leaders, how are you letting your dental team members know how they're impacting the day, how they're making a difference, how you couldn't be working there without them? Little things like that during the day help feed those plants. Feed your employees just like the water and sunshine do plants. All right, let's go to our third mistake. And this is one that I'm certainly not an expert on, and I turn over to other people, but not using social media correctly. And what do I mean by that? There's lots of different ways for us to get our message out there, right? And I'm not saying you have to be on every platform. What I am saying, and what I've heard from people like Rita Zamora, who's a social media expert out there, and so many others, is pick one lane and really make sure that you are pushing out your message. You know, I asked you a few minutes ago for that mission statement of what you believe in. How are you pushing that message out externally? How are you showing people who you are outside of the mask? You know, and I will tell you, one of the biggest ways that I have seen people do this is through Instagram. 1 billion plus users since its debut in 2010. I mean, it has exploded upon the scene. And it's something that I've seen a lot of dental practices. If you ever go on Instagram and just search for #dental, #dentist, #dentistry, I think you'll see some very interesting ways that a lot of practices push out who they are and what makes them different. And here's the other thing. It shows what makes them human as well. It shows what causes they work for. It shows how they've impacted patients. It shows the charities that they help with. A lot of different things where social media can really help push out who you are and, again, why you exist.
Yeah, I like to say when it comes to social media that it puts a human face, or it wraps your practice in a warm blanket of caring. I think we do well when we remind people that the dental office is not just a place where you get your teeth taken care of, or where you have negative associations with pain, both financial and otherwise, but that these are real people who have lives and who care about you. So, you know, because often when I first started doing social media for our health partners, a lot of the dentists would complain, you know, well, this doesn't have anything to do with dentistry, what you're writing about, you know, on our behalf. I said, I know, that's the point. You know, we want to mix it up so that they don't just, we want to remind them that you're professional and caring and competent, but also, well, that you care, which is a big part of it. Professional and caring, for sure.
I love that. And my friend Rita Zamora, she reminds me constantly that it's called social media to be social. It's called that so that we can kind of get that glimpse into who we are behind the mask. And this is one thing that she said in her book, and I keep going back to it, is that it needs to be your message. It needs to be who you are. Don't cut and paste what somebody else has posted up there. Do people care about oral cancer facts? Sure, they should, but they need to know a reason why to care about that. And that's where you come in being the expert. That's where you come in being the caring soul, telling the story about how you've worked with patients and helped them. Little things like that matter so much. So this is Anne-Marie Gariza. She is a orthodontist out in the Bay Area. And one thing that I love that Anne-Marie does, and I will see her on Instagram all the time, if you do #orthodontics, I guarantee you one of her pictures will pop up. Well, Anne-Marie loves to pose with her patients. And, here's an example right here. And I will often see a patient with the smile, the braces on, and then a smile with the braces off. It's kind of the circle of life there for her patients. But one thing that she told me that is very important is that she always gets permission from the patient, or if it's a child, permission from the parent in order to post anything. And every state, believe it or not, has different laws whenever it comes to model releases and how you can properly have someone sign and have a document that they give you permission to use them in social media.
Yeah. So one way to do that, Kevin, if I can just interject, is
please.
When you, as part of your new patient enrollment, you should have one of the forms be an authorization to release. And that way, you still have to deal with maybe all the patients that are, but as the year goes around, you just say, we need to update our paperwork, and would you mind please, completing these forms for our files. And that should include video releases as I hope everybody in attendance recognizes the value of patient testimonial videos. And
absolutely, great point. Great point. And so if you don't know the exact form, absolutely check with your state dental association, your local dental association. That's certainly something they can help you out with. So great point. And I'm just going to throw these up there real quick. And that third one is really important. Social media is about being social. Take the opportunity to show if the doctor loves to play golf, if one of your hygienists is the tooth fairy at the local school, whatever it is outside of the operatory where you can have a more human feel to who you are and share that, it's something that will help connect a lot of times with patients who might be out there. All right, our fourth mistake. And this is one that was very interesting, especially in the wake of COVID-19, whenever a lot of dental practices were still trying to figure out how to rebound, how to make sure that they reach that production that they had pre-pandemic, and it's a training budget. And when I say a training budget, I mean that every year, I believe that you need to set aside time and resources for any technology that there is in your practice, whether that's your software, if you have lasers, CAD CAM, whatever it might be, so that your team is constantly updated with what is going on with the technology and any new advances that might be out. I have seen it, Danny, you've probably seen it as well. So often there will be a doctor who will go away to a retreat. He or she will learn how to use a laser or some other form of technology, and they're going to be like, oh man, we're going to come back and institute this in the practice, and it's going to be fantastic. And here's what the team ends up doing, because they don't understand how it fits in, and they only see it as more work for them. So how do you
even if they do agree to embrace it, then see, I warn people about the zealousness of the recent convert, which is what people are when they come back from a session like that, and so often the team will be, if they went with the doctor, and this may not be the exact point you're making, I recognize. Obviously, it's about cohesiveness, But you've got to think about the cohesiveness with your patients too, because if you come back and you learn about a great new laser treatment, and every patient that comes in who's accustomed to your typical prophy appointment, and you're saying, well, we're going to do this laser because this is the best thing we could do for you, and of course it costs twice as much. You got to be careful with the rate of the communication. It's great to be enthusiastic, as we both agreed, but you got to dish it out in measured ways.
And if you're the dentist and you say we're going to use the laser on you, and you leave the room, and that patient turns to the assistant and says, "What do you think?" You need to make sure that assistant understands why that choice was made and the benefits of it to help communicate as well. That cohesiveness that you're talking about. Absolutely.
Yep.
So my friend Dr. John Falucki, who's the technology editor for Dental Products Report, and worked with John for a number of years there at DPR, this is one thing that he said. He shuts down his practice 4 days every year, 1 day a quarter, and during those days he sets aside time for an individual technology. Now, certainly there are the CPR days, the things that you need to do with life-saving and emergencies, which is so very important. But he will set aside time, and he knows it costs him production, all these things. But he understands as well that if his team can learn, and he as well, how they can learn to better use something, they'll be more productive. And he believes that ends up being a better investment for his day, even than maybe seeing patients, because then the rewards can be multiplied out throughout the year. So this is Camp Pendleton out in California, and this statue is called No Man Left Behind. And I think that's what we've got to think about whenever it comes to our team members. Whenever something is being changed in the practice, when a new technology is introduced, whatever it might be, we can't just have somebody assume they know why it's being done. Everybody has to be on the same page. Everybody has to be up to speed with how to use it, as well as we mentioned earlier, that explanation on why it's being used as well. So no man left behind absolutely is a theme that should be in your practice. And of course, no woman left behind as well. All right, our fifth mistake. Oh man, making your patients uncomfortable. And what do I mean by that? Well, it can be as simple as maybe you have some older equipment that isn't exactly, the easiest to sit in. Maybe you have, like I said, that feel in your practice that maybe you all aren't exactly getting along, and those vibes are starting to get out. But what do we mean by really making patients uncomfortable, and what can you do? I will tell you, and Danny, I know you believe this as well, that front desk experience is so critical on so many levels. The first thing they see when they walk in, the last thing they see when they walk out. So what are you doing to make sure that your front desk and that front office experience is the best that it can possibly be for the dental patient? And a lot of times it comes down to the handoff, right? How are you making sure that whenever Mrs. Jones walks out of the operatory and walks to the front office, that everything from next appointment to payment details to what happened that day, everything is easily communicated? And I know in today's short-staffed environment that sometimes you can't have somebody walk up there, or it may be you're running so far behind, you're not able to focus on Mrs. Jones because you're already thinking about the next patient. So I really want you to think about how is the handoff in your practice between back and front, and what kind of experience is that for your patients as well? And I'm just going to ask you, when's the last time you sat in your reception area or waiting room or whatever you want to call it? When's the last time you sat in those chairs, looked around at the environment, kind of thought of yourself as a customer rather than a dental professional?
That's a great point too, Kevin. And I'm sure you're aware of this too. There are many dentists, practice owners, and team members who don't even enter the practice through the front door. They have a back entrance, and you really owe it to yourself to once in a while check out what that patient's journey is just from the parking lot to your front desk.
That's a great point. And speaking of the parking lot, when's the last time you drove by, not just on your way to work, but you drove by your dental practice and really looked at what it looked like through a customer's eyes? Maybe at night, is the lighting, sufficient? Are there lights out? Are there, Is the sign broken? Little things like that can really make a difference as far as perception goes. And Danny, one thing that, they don't walk through the front door. Well, more often than not, they don't sit in the dental chair either. So, invite each other to sit in that chair and be a patient and lean back and see what it's like. What are you looking at up above? If you still got the 70s poster of Hang In There with the kitty hanging off the limb, maybe it's time to think about something else going in there. Little things where you put yourself in the mind of the patient, it can pay really big dividends for you.
And I extend that to, I'm sorry, Kevin, but just in terms, related to that is every touch point that a prospective or current patient has, you ought to be aware of and familiar with. And that would include what happens when people are placed on hold. If you have an on-hold message, do you know what it says? What about your website? What about your reviews? These are things that your customers are going to be checking out, so you should be aware of them, because the worst answer to the question is, hey, I just saw on your website your special offer. Could you tell me about that? And your answer is, ma'am, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh man, yeah. Or
not a good way to connect.
Yeah.
All right, right. That expired, but we forgot to take it down. Good point.
Little things like that, and a lot of things that I'm talking about tonight, especially in this section, absolutely, they may cost you a little bit of money. It may be some internal, things that you're going to focus on, and some of your profits may go toward that. But again, like we were talking about with Dr. Fluke and cutting down his practice days to focus on technology, things like this can really pay dividends down the road if you make sure that you're reinvesting in your practice. All right, we are on the downhill slide here. Let's go to mistake number 6. And this is one that I'm telling you, whenever I do this in person, I get a lot of uncomfortable seat adjustments right now, because we don't really like talking about our team members' smiles sometimes, maybe even our own smiles sometimes. I will tell you, if we were doing this on video, you would see my smile's by no means perfect. I have the Tom Cruise midline working hard right now. But if you're a dentist pushing out cosmetic services, if you're a dentist pushing out full mouth rehabilitation, but your dental assistant, your dental hygienist doesn't have a smile that you're proud of, what can you do to change that? Because I will tell you, if this is how you're telling me that we're going to do some case presentations, I'm not so sure I want you in my mouth. So I really want you to think about, what are you showing patients, not only with what could be done with their own mouths, but maybe what's been done in your team members, using them as examples of before and afters, using them as examples of what a healthy mouth and a healthy smile can really look like. And whenever I do this at dental meetings, I hear this all the time. Whoops, I'm sorry. Let's go back. There's a lot of reasons why you shouldn't do it. And trust me, I understand those. But I also believe that this is one of those times when what you say and what you do should be congruent with each other. They should blend together. And using your team members as examples and really shining pillars for what your practice stands for, I think is a really important thing. All right, let's go to mistake number 7, and that is CE. I'm thankful to all of you who are listening to this tonight, who've taken time out of your schedule to make this work, and I think everybody on your team needs to be involved with continuing education. And I understand that, in some states, dental assistants aren't required to have education. I understand the front office, front desk team members often aren't required to have education. But how are they learning? How are they getting better at what they do? How are they improving their skills? And I think, let's go back to this. No man left behind, right? If the dentist and the hygienist are moving forward with improving their skills, what are you doing to make sure that the assistant and the front office are improving what they can do as well? I think it is so vitally important to not only plan for CE for the entire team, but to talk to your team members about what areas they want to improve in this year. It's a great goal for 2023. Talk to every team member a year from now or at the end of this year. What do you want to have seen improved professionally, and how can we help you with that goal? And I put a selfie of myself in here, so sorry about that. But it really is knowledge is power, right? It is
just a body, though, right?
It's just the body. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
I just put Einstein on there. I mean, you've seen me, Danny. Come on.
I know. They're not news to me.
but it is something that I truly believe that whenever we understand each other and whenever we really know what makes each other tick and our goals for the year and how we can help each other accomplish that, man, it builds some tremendous relationships along the way. All right, our 8th mistake. And man, I am thankful, I know probably all of you are as well, that we are now in an era where we can all be back together, where we can all attend shows together. I don't think we realized how much that we missed those bonding moments as an industry until they were taken away from us. So I want you to think about, again, if we're talking about all members getting CE, how is that being done? Is there an in-person event that you can do as a team to work together and really learn from each other? Obviously, not everyone is going to go to the same class at a Chicago Midwinter or a Oklahoma Dental Association meeting or whatever it might be. But you can have the team split up and then report back on the big things they learned and learn from each other and those experiences and make them shared experiences. Every 2 years, and in March in 2023, this will happen again in Cologne, Germany, is the IDS meeting. And I always tell dental professionals it's a bucket list meeting. And that's a really weird thing to say about dental meetings. But this is a meeting where there are no CE courses. It is literally walking around and seeing all the latest advances in dentistry and what is to come for our industry. It's something that I've gone to 9 times in my career, and I've been so blessed to be able to do that. And every time that I go, 2 or 3 years later, I see something come in and I go, oh, I remember when I was at IDS. And the crowds to get in every morning are just amazing because everybody wants to see these massive exhibit halls and learn this technology and touch it and play with it. So, it may not be March 2023, but maybe March 2025 or 27. You put that on your bucket list to head to Cologne, Germany for that.
It's on my list. I've been to Cologne several times, but never coincided with the IDS meeting. But I know that you're a big advocate of it, and I'm going to add it to my list.
I just believe so strongly in us all having a shared experience and learning from each other. And that's why I encourage you, set aside something this year where you all can all do it together and really break it down later. Those Monday morning huddles, those team meetings, have a time set aside where everybody presents the course they went to, why they went to it, what they learned from it, and would they go back? Little things like that where you can share with each other and really listen and learn from each other is really important. All right, our 9th mistake. Oh boy, this is a big one. And really, honestly, maybe this should be number 1 of what we talked about, but I always like to bury it toward the end because I want people to really remember this one, and that is not being willing to change. Now, Danny, I don't know about where you grew up, but where I did, there was the saying about the frog in the boiling pot of water. Did you ever hear that one?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, those of you who didn't, let me just tell it to you real quick. The saying goes that if you put a frog into a boiling pot of water, it will jump right back out because it knows it's in danger. But if you put a frog in a pot of water and you slowly turn it up to boil, the frog will literally boil to death because it doesn't realize that the environment around it has changed until it's too late. Now, please don't call PETA on me. I have not tried this in person, but this is something that my grandpa and grandma told me countless times growing up about being aware of your surroundings and always being adapt to change, being flexible to change. And this is my parents, back in Oklahoma. I love them both. Like I said, my dad's getting ready to turn 80 next month. My dad was a fantastic oil pipeline designer when I was growing up. Tulsa used to be the oil capital of the world. And my dad helped design the pipeline that brings oil down from Alaska into the continental United States and then pushes it out to everywhere else in the U.S. There's a holding tank in Cushing, Oklahoma, where all the oil goes and then it spreads out from there. My dad helped design that. And so it's still a point of pride for him to this day. But I will tell you, a lot of the memories I have growing up were my dad hunched over this drafting table and manually drawing the pipeline and doing all these calculations by hand and everything else. And there was one day that my dad was working and his boss came in and said, Pat, we need you to sign up for CAD/CAM courses. We're going to move everything to digital now. You're not going to be doing this, hand stuff anymore. It's going to be something where we're using machines to help us be more productive. And my dad refused to do it. My dad was asked twice more to take the CAD/CAM courses, learn how to do this, be part of the company, and my dad refused every time. Well, there was no fourth time. My dad was fired from his job because he refused to learn a new technology. Now, to this day, my dad, he's kind of a crotchety guy. He'll still tell you the computers are just a fad. He's never going to get online and look at anything. I can guarantee you that. But I always think back to what if he had just said, okay, I'm willing to learn something new, and how life might have been different for him. And I think to all of those dental team members that I have seen through the years who have done the same thing the same way over and over, and even whenever they go to a new practice, they're reluctant to change because it's not the way we used to do it at our old practice, right? So if I were to encourage you to do anything, and if you hear nothing else I say tonight, I hope that 2023 you'll be open to change and really looking at the things that are working well in your practice and the things that could be working better. I love this cartoon. My wife and I laugh about it all the time because she's kind of this way. As long as she has her coffee, it doesn't matter. In the mornings, everything else could be falling around. She's got her coffee. But the real thing behind this cartoon is that so often we get so focused on one thing or that day. And again, like that frog in the boiling pot of water, we don't realize what's going on around us. So I hope that you'll be able to take a step back and kind of look at your dental practice, where it's really heading, where are some of the areas that maybe it's not living up to the standard it should be, or not living up to the production it should be, and how you can really help make a difference with that and inspire your team to be on board with that as well this year. So how do you change things? I will tell you, there's a lot of opportunities out there, and sometimes it takes that external view to really rattle us a little bit. People like Danny who can work with you from the outside in. Your sales reps that come into your practice all the time. Ask them, what are they hearing about dental practice down the street or across town? What are some of the new technologies that they're hearing about? Little things like that where people from the outside can help plant a seed and really make a difference for you. I think you might be surprised the changes it can bring along. All right, our final mistake, and this is a big one as well, and transparency with numbers. And what do I mean by that? I will tell you, I have talked to countless team members around the country who never have the goals shared with them, or they don't have the way that the practice is doing that month toward the goal. They don't know if they're hitting the goal. They don't know if they're missing the goal. They just know that they're working every day. They're going home, rinse and repeat the next day, the next day, the next day. So I encourage you, if you have weekly goals, if you have quarterly goals, monthly goals, however you set it up in your practice, make sure your entire team knows what those goals are and how every one of them makes a difference toward hitting that goal. As well as, again, if it's a weekly goal, how are you advancing toward that goal every week or month? Make sure that everybody's up to speed. Go ahead, Dan.
I think it's an excellent point because, I often say that goals, even the most exciting bonuses, can actually be demotivational. Because if the person is given a goal, but they're not given the means to achieve them, which goes back to your other points about training the team and investing in that. But if you don't break it down into bite-sized portions, they're not going to believe that they can achieve. The other thing that I think is really important about sharing numbers is that if it's been a long time since I've been employed. Oh, I am a ski instructor, but I'm seasoned enough that I don't have this mindset anymore. But most employees think that their boss is rich. They think that a practice owner is loaded. And so I really encourage my health partners, which is how we refer to our clients, to be transparent to the point where people understand that, we have a lot of expenses here. All this money that you collect doesn't go into my pocket. In fact, most of it doesn't. And you can be as transparent or forthcoming as you want on that, but I think it's important to remember and recognize that when employees don't know, they assume that you're set and that you have no financial issues at all.
Yep. And I think that's part of that whole, sharing and communicating, the things that we've talked about. A lot of people are real nervous about talking about money. And it's surprising to me how emotional money can be whenever it really just needs to be a black and white issue that this is where we are, this is where we want to go, and this is how we're going to get there together.
Right. This is how you're going to help us get there. That's right.
Absolutely. When I bring this up at the Hinman meeting in Atlanta, I am booed constantly, but we got to flashback a little bit here. If you remember Super Bowl 51, you remember that there was a moment late in the third quarter where it looked like the Falcons were going to win. There was no way the Patriots were going to come back in this game, right? No way at all. Well, if you remember your history and you ever doubted Tom Brady in his prime, well, that day he came back, helped the Patriots win in overtime, largest Super Bowl comeback in history. The Patriots won 34-28 after being down 28-3 late in the third quarter. And they asked Tom Brady after the game, what made the difference? And this is one of the quotes that he said. And what he's saying here is that he knew that they had to throw the ball because they knew the score. They knew that they had a certain amount of time to make up the deficit. And I think that's where we have to think about this in dental terms, that your practice may be down 28-3 late in the third quarter, but how are you communicating to your team that you've still got X amount of time left? Here's how we can do this together. Let's make this happen. Linda Miles, and I quoted her earlier, but one thing that she said once is, if you don't know the score, you don't know how to properly play the game. And if the Patriots had taken their time, run the ball, just kind of lackadaisical going up the line of scrimmage, they would have never had time to make up the difference. They knew that they were under pressure, and they knew also how to get something done in that amount of time and under that pressure. We've been through a lot, and it has been a run. And I really appreciate your time, your patience, your understanding. But I really want to make sure one thing. We're in a new year. Don't go back to doing the old thing. Don't go back to being just in your rut, your comfort zone. And my goodness, there's better beer out there than Milwaukee's Best Light. Come on, people. You can do better than this. So what do I hope that you'll take away from this? The biggest thing to me is see where some change can happen in your practice. See where there are some weaknesses. Be open to admitting that there are some weaknesses there, and help and come up with a plan together on how you're going to tackle those weaknesses and make them better in the coming months, the coming weeks. Last thing I'll share with you. I live in Colorado, beautiful part of the world. I'm blessed to live here, and especially in the fall. One of the things that my wife and I love to do is go up in the mountains in the fall and check out the aspens as they turn to this bright golden color. Well, the thing that I've learned about aspen trees, other than they're beautiful in the fall, is also that they all form out of the same root ball. So an aspen grove really comes out of the same root structure. And when one of those trees dies, is cut down, goes away, there's always another one that springs up from that same root structure to take its place. And so I know that we've had a lot of defections in dentistry. I know a lot of practices are dealing with hiring issues. I know that there's a lot of questions about what is to come. But I will tell you, if your practice has a strong foundation, that strong root ball, and everybody understands how they fit into the structure, I guarantee you that even if somebody leaves, you'll be able to find somebody to fit into that culture and spring right up and really keep going strong together. So that is my email address. I'm certainly happy to have you reach out. Any questions that I can clarify, any points you want to talk about, that's my email address. Would love to talk to you. And Danny, I really appreciate your time and letting me be on tonight and share some of these things.
Well, the pleasure was mine. I know on behalf of everyone in attendance, you pack a lot into a very short period of time. Can't believe how fast the time went, and really appreciate you taking the time to do it. A couple of questions I've got for you. Do you think it's become more important for practice owners to treat their teams correctly? In other words, do you think with the new generation of in the workforce, how do you think that plays?
Yeah, I do. And I will tell you one thing that I've seen happen in a lot of practices lately, and it's kind of becoming an interesting trend. You know, Danny, there's a lot of things that whenever an employee gets ready to leave, excuse me, he or she may have an exit interview where they talk about what went wrong, what could have gone better. Well, at that point, the employee's already out the door. What I've seen a lot of dental practices start doing are called stay interviews, where dental practices are talking to their team members ahead of time, you know, talking to them about their goals, their hopes, what they could be doing better, how they could be working together in a stronger capacity. Ways that now, with this, like you said, this new generation coming in that thrives on communication, with the shortage of team members, and, you know, let's be real honest here, excuse me, a lot of team members possibly looking to hop to other practices, to take other positions. It's really important to focus on the team members you have, really get to understand what their goals, their desires, their hopes are, those motivators we talked about earlier, and really put those into play so that you can keep the team members that you want.
Absolutely, that is important. And you know, it's just a follow-up to the issue about some of the challenges that practice owners face with deciding to improve their team members' smiles. So I think you talk about the challenges or the reasons that they may be hesitant to do it. But how do you bring up with a team member that his or her smile needs to be better as a precondition for employment?
Yeah. You know, and I do think that really, let's be honest, they probably already know that ahead of time. And I really do think that it's something that you can be very kind about it. You know, you can say, you know, in this industry, image is very important. Certainly, if it's something that we choose to work together, I'll want to work with you on your smile. I would love to document our journey together and have you be an advocate for what we're doing here and why we're doing it. You know, and I know some of you, and I know some bristle at that, thinking, well, I'm just giving away dentistry, and they may leave next week. But I think it's really important because even if they're there a short amount of time, being able to use them as a before and after case, even after they're gone, I think that that's a really important thing. And as long as they're there, they can become living, breathing advocates for you.
Yep. And as long as you have their permission, which, you know, I guess speaks to the point that we don't only want your patients to sign the releases, but also the team members.
Fantastic point. Absolutely right.
Yeah. Now, before I move on to the concluding remarks, you have an offer that you want to extend to our attendees, don't you?
I do. I appreciate that, Danny. Thank you.
Tell us about it. Sure thing.
Absolutely. So as you see my email address on your screen, and as I mentioned, I love to work with dental practices all over the country whenever it comes to learning more about each other and their personalities. You know, we're all wired differently. We all believe different things. And trying to bring all these different personalities together can sometimes be a challenge, but it's one that I love to work with dental practices. So if you would like to talk to me about how I could help your practice, whether it's in person or whether it's online, I'd love to do that. Drop me an email and just use the code Danny. And if you just mention that code Danny, we can certainly talk about 25% off my services, where I can help your dental team members and you understand each other, hopefully in a new way. So drop me an email, use promo code Danny. You and I can talk about how you would like to see your dental practice change, and we'll craft something that I promise will make an impact for you.
Oh, you will indeed, I know. And thanks for the offer, and thanks for the promo code. I'm touched.
You got it. Absolutely.
All right, everybody. You will soon receive an email detailing how to apply to receive your 1.5 hours of CE credit. I now want to invite you to mark your calendars for Thursday, February 23rd, when my very special guest will be Dr. Earl Bogro, the man who spells his last name exactly like mine, except for one letter, which I was shocked when I met him. but his presentation is titled Obstructive Sleep Apnea and Oral Appliance Therapy, Connecting the Dental Dots. Dental offices are the #1 portal for identifying and screening patients for obstructive sleep apnea, a potential life-threatening condition. It is therefore incumbent upon practitioners who embrace dental sleep medicine to master the techniques for articulating the importance of sleep to patients, health practitioners, and other referral sources. You will learn the best practices for achieving this objective at this exciting and informative event. It all happens on Thursday, February 23rd, so be sure to save the date and watch your inbox to register. Until then, this is Danny Bobrow thanking you for your commitment to practice perfection. Goodbye, everybody.